everybody. I'm Candid Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download the app, make sure you rate, leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free. Zingo TV is available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also our smart TVs 2016 forward. And don't forget to subscribe to Candid Stanisci 1030 on YouTube. Now, as usual, David Morassutti is joining us, and we have a very special guest. And, Mr. Hogan, Mike Hogan is with us, the voice of the Canadian Football League, and specifically the Toronto Argonauts. And we forgive him a little bit for being a Philadelphia Eagles fan. I haven't figured that one out yet, but
you can forgive him. I can't.
Mike is a football fan. And like we talk all the time on this show, we have nothing against the NFL. We love football. Football is football. And it's a lot of fun covering the game. It's a lot of fun watching both kinds of football. But we're here to talk about the Argos, Mike. And I guess the first and most important question I guess most Argo fans want to know is, from your opinion, where do we sit as far as the quarterback is concerned on the Toronto Argonauts?
I think everybody's happy with Chad as QB1. When Mac decided to go back and be close to family, that was, there was a challenge to Chad Kelly to show up in the offseason and work diligently and learn everything he could about the playbook. And everything that was expected, he surpassed. He worked his rear end off. They had to basically tell him to leave the facility because he wanted to be in there all the time doing the work. He lived in Toronto more so than he did in Buffalo and worked out with the receivers in the offseason, immersed himself in the community, was at MLSE Launchpad often. I mean, this is to work with kids. And whatever we expected in training camp, I think he exceeded any expectation. It's his team. He looked really comfortable with the offense. He's an incredibly gifted person, and now we just have to see whether he can take what he's learned and put it into action in gameplay. I know it wasn't against the ones against Ottawa, but you guys were there. You saw what he did. He looked pretty damn good in limited reps against Ottawa a couple of days ago.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I might got to see that firsthand, just what Chad, even with the limited amount of time he's had, the rapport is there with the receivers. So that's obviously a good sign for everything that's been done through training camp. Of course, the biggest question that was being asked is who's the number 2? And for most of training camp, we just never had that idea. Many thought it would be Ben Holmes just because he was there right from last year, and they thought that would carry over. And it turns out that's not going to be the case. And when you look at the other 2 quarterbacks that were able to stick around through camp, maybe just explain to those, like, what about them made that decision to cut Ben Holmes a little bit easier?
I don't know if it was easy when worse came to worse, because all 3 of them flashed, and none of the 3 showed. They were the number 2 guy every day. One day it would be Scott, one day it would be Dukes, one day it would be Holmes, and there'd be a little regression in somebody, and then somebody else would step up the next day. So I think Ben had a rough outing in Hamilton, and I don't know if that sealed his fate, but it kind of put some separation when they saw what Dukes was able to do, what Scott was able to do. Right now, I don't even know who QB2 is in the mind of Ryan Dinwiddie. So we know who 2 and 3 are, but I don't know what the order is. So I think both of the guys have shown a little bit of experience. Scott a little bit in the USF or the XFL. He was leading the league in passing when he got hurt last year. And then, Dukes comes basically out of nowhere, out of an NAIA school, and really, really showed a lot in camp. And for those who were lucky enough to go to Hamilton or see the highlights, you saw there's a little bit of improvisational skill there. And, an underhanded flip pass from his end zone because there was a receiver open. A chest pass almost. I mean, he's that guy. So I think that maybe they saw a little bit more upside in those 2 quarterbacks than they did in Ben. It certainly wasn't a personality thing because Ben's as nice a guy as you could possibly meet. So It was a tough decision, no doubt, but it was one that had to be made, sadly.
Ryan Dinwiddie has historically, well, 4 years, if that's historically has been a coach that has not necessarily gone with the quarterback that's supposed to be the one that starts. He's a very meritocratic person. He really he hands the quarterback that's doing the best. He's not afraid to give a player a chance that is proving that maybe he deserves it.
Yeah, we've seen that. Everybody thought that Nick Arbuckle was going to be the guy, and it was McLeod Bethel Thompson. And Mac got the keys last year and ran with it. I think that was based on merit as well, because Chad hadn't really seen the league yet, and Chad this year has seen a little bit of the league, certainly as a QB2 last year, but he won it in camp. I don't think if Chad Kelly had have come out and crapped the bed, I don't know if he'd be QB1 right now. He still may be, but Dinwiddie, gave him that challenge in the offseason. Come in, be QB1. It's yours to win. And there's no question Chad Kelly won it. He was meritorious in that selection. QB1 was easy. And when it came down to 2 and 3, I think it came down to merit as well. Again, like I say, I don't know who will be the first guy in should, Chad get in a fight in the first quarter in the game against Hamilton and get kicked out. I don't know who the next man is, but, there's a big part of me that hopes we don't have to find out.
Yeah, I don't think you will find out. I think the most important thing that we can look at as far as the quarterback is concerned, he was already in a position to be the number one, even if you remember, at the downtown at BMO when the Argos won the Grey Cup. Ryan Dinwiddie, from that moment, right after the Grey Cup, 2 weeks later, said, yeah, he can start. I have all the faith in the world that he can start. So this isn't something that should surprise anyone. He's made it public. He's made it public that he has a lot of faith in Ryan Dinwiddie, and that's whether McLeod Bethel Thompson came back or not. That was before that. So I think they're pretty set at quarterback.
Yeah, and Chad again has been that interesting guy throughout his career. Whether it was his first go around in the NCAA or when he played JUCO at the college that became best known, I guess, for Last Chance U, East Mississippi State or whatever the name is. But was Eastern Mississippi Community College? Is that the name of it? I can't remember. He went there and then he goes to Ole Miss and just looked fantastic. He was second team all SEC 2 different seasons, and looked fantastic in the process. So didn't work out for him in the NFL. Went back and coached for a year and just had the bug, and there was still something there that he had to find out for himself, and was able to do that with the Argos last year. And in practice, he looked good. And when he had the opportunity to play in the game against Montreal in the last game of the season, he looked good. And then when he had the opportunity to come in and basically rescue the Argos in the Grey Cup game, he looked good as well. So there's a limited amount of work in the CFL, but what he's done well. So that's what the Argos are counting on this year.
Mike, that's interesting. David, did you hear what he said? He rescued the Argos in the Grey Cup. I mean, did you hear that? It's okay, Mike. That's what we said immediately after the Grey Cup, and I continue to say that we really don't know what would have happened if he didn't come in. And this is not as a slight on McLeod Bethel Thompson. It's just that he did play well. He did, improve the offense, and now we get to find out. Does that help his confidence, in your opinion, going into this year, knowing that he won a big game? I mean, there is no bigger game in the Canadian Football League. Grey Cup is the game.
Well, sure. And, who knows? Mac may have come in and thrown touchdown passes in the last 2 drives. We don't know.
We don't.
It's speculation either way. He was a hell of a quarterback. He played really well for the Argos. He got hurt. Chad came in and played really well for the Argos. So, we were in a position where we had a really good quarterback as our starter and a potentially really good quarterback as our backup, who came in and played really well when he had to, including, a scramble on a 2nd and 15 that we're going to be talking about for years. Now it's up to him to live up to pretty lofty expectations. And the guy that probably thinks he can live up to them more than anybody else is the guy who's going to wear number 12 this year.
All that whole scenario speaks to David's question: who's the number 2? That's why the number 2 one is an important, question.
I did a story on this, last week for
Mhm.
Argonaut.ca before Ben was released, and it was still up in the air then. And as Ryan said, Thursday night was vital because somebody had to, solidify themselves at least temporarily as the number 2 guy, because as he said, you're one play away from being the starter. And I don't know who that is in Ryan Dinwiddie's mind. It could be either one of them, because the competition between 2, 3, and 4 was indeed that close. So I don't know. And, like I said earlier, I hope that we never do, unless it's because the Argonauts are ahead by 50 going into the fourth quarter.
I think your organization respects the number 2 position. David?
Oh, for sure. And I think, it's not just when it comes to this offense, it's not going to just be the quarterback. It's going to be a lot of the other pieces, right? The receivers, if you look at last year, it's pretty, not many teams get to bring back almost an identical receiving core from a championship team. Even the running backs, to have that, not only have those guys back, but to have maybe even more depth at the position that we've ever seen. I think that was by design to help, Chad or whoever it will be the backup to know that they got the weapons to be as successful as possible.
And also got deeper on the offensive line. They brought in Sirocco. Guys are coming back. Isaiah Cage is healthy this year. So, you want to keep them healthy. And you guys are right. You give them the toys to play with. And with Daniels back, and with Phillips back, and with Ambles back. Coxie was hurt at the end of last season, just when he was starting to step up. So you've got 4 import receivers plus BJ Bird now, who looked good in the preseason. He's on the practice roster. And then not only do you have the depth, Curly Gittens Jr., who is, if he's not the best receiver Canadian-wise in the CFL, statistically he was last year, and he's one of the top receivers in the league, regardless of his birth certificate. So not only do you have him, Tommy Neal is back and healthy. You've got Brissett, who's due to take that next step as well. And David Ungerer comes in. So you've solidified the depth in that position as well. So you're right. The running backs are back, all 4 of them who dressed last year. And they've added DeMonte McMahon, who, if you see his film from McNeese State, he's something else. And if you saw him in practice this year, there's something special about this kid. So yeah, it's a really good offense that got a little bit deeper across the board at literally every position.
That depth is key. I mean, we saw, all season, when your number 1 running back goes down all year, except for the last game of the season, and you have the number 2 guy, I think he was as good as any number 1 in the league.
And it gives you, it allows you, with a guy who's 30, what's Andrew now, 34, it takes some city miles off the chassis over the course of the regular season. You've got a guy who runs hard in Andrew Harris. You've got a guy who may run harder in AJ Ouellette. You've got a change of pace guy in Leak, and you've got a guy who can play special teams and fill in should the need be, and Dan Adeboboye. So 4 guys who are significant contributors to the football team. Leak is obviously returner 1 at this stage as well. It's rare that you see 4 tailbacks, for lack of a better term, starting in the CFL because of the limited roster space. But because all 4 are going to be utilized, you're going to see all 4 this year. And, if one of them happens to go down, you're going to see McMahon be able to step in. And I don't think you're going to lose much just seeing what this kid has to offer.
And we also know that this is Andrew's last year. So for some of the guys, this is also a chance to audition for a spot even for next year, because, with him leaving, that just another job that opens up right there.
Yeah, and it is a meritocracy, as Frank said a little bit earlier on. And if a guy is hot, he's going to get the carries. And last year we saw Andrew essentially between the 20s for the most part in the Grey Cup game, and when they got inside the red zone, here comes AJ Ouellette to run over people like he did in that game. We saw it, throughout the season where he became a guy inside the red zone, inside the 10-yard line, because of his strength and his power, is very difficult to bring down. I mean, Adam Bighill is one of the surest tacklers in the Canadian Football League in the last decade, and AJ ran him over in the Grey Cup for a touchdown. That's not an easy thing to do, but that's the power of AJ Ouellette. So. And we saw that in the exhibition game, the preseason game against Ottawa, where they got inside the 10, and there was AJ who ran it into the end zone. So having a running back by committee, especially when it's a committee of 4, 3 specifically, that's a really advantageous thing to do, especially when you get into October and November. You're going to have fresher legs, and having somebody who's going to be running the ball 90% of the time for another team.
And it's about opportunity. AJ took over because of an injury to Harris. Don't think that the other 2 running backs haven't seen that now and understand how the Canadian Football League is and how this specific team works. That, get ready, because there's going to be plays in there for you when you get in.
It's very difficult to stay healthy in professional football. And, the odds are somebody's going to get nicked up over the course of the season. Last year, Harris did. Last year, Leak did as well, which opened the door for Ouellette, and he just kicked in the door. There are guys now who want that opportunity. And the really neat thing about this is how tight these guys are. Like, it's a healthy rivalry. Everybody wants their touches, obviously, but there's no malice. These guys are always picking up the other one. When Harris was hurt, he was the first guy there. He was essentially a coach on the sidelines every game, home and road. And he was there talking to AJ, trying to help him out. And when they were able to play at the same time in the East Final, where Andrew finally scored his first touchdown as an Argonaut, AJ was there to pick him up as well. I mean, it's a really symbiotic relationship between those two. And Leak is able to contribute as well in some packages. He's in there as the tailback, and he's obviously able to produce as a returner, who got better and better as the year progressed. He had a big game in Montreal, the second last game of the season, that clinched home field for the Argos, and then had a spectacular return. Had a couple of them, in fact, in the Grey Cup game.
I want to remind folks we're with Mike Hogan of the Toronto Argonauts. He's their radio guy, and anytime you go to the game, if you're the media, he's a great guy to talk to about the game, and there's nobody that loves football more. I guess, check on the quarterback, check on the running backs, David, check on the receivers. We've even mentioned about the offensive line. Mike is very happy, and the Argos, I assume, are very happy with the offensive line. Can we jump to special teams? One of the things that people it's hard to not assume that the guy catching the ball and running with it is not responsible for his ability to get a touchdown. How important and how big a fix do you think, with some of the changes that were made on special teams, can the Argos look at a more improved special teams?
Well, the good thing is you got both kickers back. We'll start that way. Haggerty led the league in punting average last year as a first-year player. Born and raised in Australia. He did his NCAA tour of duty at Western Kentucky, and the Argos picked him in the first round of the global draft a year ago, and came in and just took the league by storm. Averaged close to 50 yards per kick. I think it was 48.6 or something like that. And then, in the Grey Cup, here's an Australian who played in Western Kentucky, who comes up and plays in the coldest game of his life and had a spectacular Grey Cup game. So, they're very set there. Boris Beattie has the strongest leg in the league, was a little inconsistent last year. He had 1 year earlier in his career that was kind of like that, but a lot of the kicks that he missed last year were pretty long. And this year, I think that things will be a little bit easier and a little quicker to get. And this is a get off, and this isn't a shot at Max Latour at all, but Adam Guillemette is in as a long snapper, and his velocity on his long snaps is just different. He's gifted. People, I think, at one point were going, why did the Argos take a long snapper in the third round? And if you go back and think about the career Jake Reinhardt had here, would you have taken him in the third round in his draft year? And I think, in retrospect, it would be an easy yes from everybody. That's the kind of career they're hoping Guillemette has here with the Argonauts. So I think the kicking game and long snapping is in good hands. I think they're fine with Leak. what they have to do is just get a little more consistent with their blocking. They seem to be getting to that phase late in the season last year, and we saw the result with Leak busting some toward the end of the season. So I'm confident that the staff and special teams coordinator Mickey Donovan were able to get the guys they wanted that can excel on special teams. Some of the new guys, I'm sure, were kept because of their prowess, and you saw it with the ones in terms of kickoff return. Having a Darius Pickett deep with Leak gives a guy who can return, as Pickett did at UCLA. He was used as a returner, but also you've got Leak, and if he has the ball, you get one hell of a good blocker in front of him with the Darius Pickett. So I think the special teams are in for a pretty good season this year.
When you look at the special teams, the other thing is just trying to get those touchdowns, as you mentioned. And in the game against Ottawa and Guelph, we saw BJ Bird pull one off for a punt for a touchdown. He's a guy that's been interesting because we talked about the receivers and how much depth and guys returning and some new guys. He's someone that's sort of flown under the radar here. And
Birds always fly, though.
Yeah. This is true. This is true. And I just wonder, is someone like him, could figure into more of the special teams role, as a returner, even for punts, and we saw even Darius Pickett do that as well during the game. I think having the options and having different guys rotating and give that a shot, maybe that's something that can help the special teams. I know that's something that they want to do. They want to improve their field position a lot more on special teams. It didn't happen as much last year as they would have liked.
Yeah, and Javon Leak was hurt for much of the season, and he was such a dynamic returner at Maryland. He has the distinction of being named Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week and Offensive Player of the Week and Special Teams Player of the Week in the same game. I think that's the only time that's happened in Big Ten history. So we know he can run. We know he can return. He always has been able to. But he went down, had the hamstring injury, which, in a weird way, was a bit of a break because that brought AJ Ouellette back into the fold. So it was a weird day that Saturday at Centennial Stadium because AJ had been cut earlier that morning, and then on a non-contact play, Leak pulled his hamstring pretty significantly. So Haydel came in. He was able to return for a while. But now they've got that number one back. Yeah, they have depth now with Bird, with Haydel still on the practice roster, the two of them. So they've got that opportunity should something happen or they're not happy with the return game for whatever reason. They've got some options now within the organization. So Leak is still the guy. He's number one. His job to lose. He's looked good in camp, so I don't see any reason why he would lose that spot. But you can also use him as a running back. So I think they're fine with the return game. And as you mentioned, they've got some depth now as well.
Dave, if you have another question about special teams, or you can ask about defense.
Well, I mean, the defense, it was interesting looking at the defense. I know Ryan said that, it's a very young, inexperienced group, especially in the secondary, because you look at the front line and then you look at linebackers, you can make up like 2 or 3 different defenses with the depth that's there. But in the secondary, it seems like that might be a little more of a work in progress in certain positions. I know injuries dictate. I think Robert Priester, he's dealing with some with an injury. You got Pickett who's slotting in, I guess, right now at DB, linebacker, depending on what scheme is being used up.
We'll just call it Sam linebacker because that's what we've used. But he's the Sam.
Exactly. So, is there concern there potentially that the secondary is going to be a little more of a work in progress because you're replacing a few guys that were key contributors and got Jamal Peters, he gets a chance to go to the NFL. That's how good he was for you guys last year.
Yeah, and he was released today, so I don't know what his future holds. Who knows? Maybe he ends up back in Toronto. But one of the interesting things in camp was the fact that Robertson Daniel had been flip-flopped and moved inside and was playing boundary halfback, and Priester moved outside and looked natural because cornerback is his natural position, even though he was used at Sam last year quite a bit. There's still Maurice Carnell IV, who should be back in, I don't know what the timeline is for him, a month or two. So he should be back certainly for the second half of the regular season. So there's an added body. Mechie, we know, is a really good safety. Amos is going to lock down the one halfback spot. And then, Tarveris McFadden had a good year last year. He adds that length on the field side. And, Quantez Stiggers had a great camp. He's made the dress roster, right? Or the roster anyway. He looked really good. Like, he's only 21 years old, which is ridiculous. Yeah. A guy who didn't play college football because he had accepted a gig at Lane College, and tragically his dad was killed in a car accident, and Stiggers is from a really big family, so it kind of put his football dreams on hold. So he didn't go to college, but played in the fan-controlled football league last year, and led the league in interceptions as a 20-year-old. So he shows up. He's got a bigger body than I had expected for a kid that age. Like he's got man strength. He's a strong kid and has a great ability to high point of football. So do not be afraid. Don't be, alarmed or shocked if you see Stiggers start to rip down some interceptions, because it seems to be what he does. He did it often in training camp, and he's just got that something about him. So, I mean, if you're looking for a newcomer, new to the league, certainly on defense, Quantez Stiggers is a guy to watch.
The Argos are a very challenging coaching staff to their defense. They really do believe, and I think more than any other team, that each player has to be a Swiss Army knife and will play different positions. To that extent, that makes it a little harder when during exhibition season. Like, they really didn't put up much of a defense against the Ottawa quarterbacks. Is that probably part of the reason where they have more of a long-term plan when it comes to how they manipulate, use, and massage the players?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you look at the way the season started last year in the secondary, and you think, well, the second game in, I think, was at Travesty out in BC, where there's several busts. And then early in the season, you did see a couple of busts. Excuse me. I think that will be a less common occurrence this year because guys know Corey Mace's system a little bit better. They know what Josh Bell is doing in the secondary. The linebackers know what Ivan is doing. So I think there's a little more cohesion because of the cohesion of the coaching staff. They are not first year coming in and learning a new coach at every positional group, essentially, and a new defensive coordinator with Mace. So I think they'll be fine. Just don't take any stock in what you see in a preseason game. These are guys essentially showing off what they can do individually and what they do know about the system. Maybe an easy bust costs somebody his job somewhere down the line. But when the game starts, when they play Hamilton on the 18th, unfurl the banner, the championship banner, I think everybody will be in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, David, I think he underlined the biggest point, and it's not a new playbook for the defense.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I mean, there were some good plays too made in that game against Ottawa. I mean, and we saw against Hamilton, once the defense kind of got their footing under them, they did pretty well in that second half and gave the Argos a chance to come back in that game. But I mean, preseason, it's more about getting guys familiar with systems and familiar with. A lot of these guys also haven't played in the CFL, so just getting used to playing in the CFL as well. The linebacker situation, I think, is probably the biggest strength that this Argos team can have, because you got someone who I thought should have been the best defensive player in Wynn McManus. I know he's working his way back. He's pretty much will be good to go once the season starts. And then you got Enoch Mwamba, a guy who won Grey Cup MVP, and then you got the new guy Jordan Williams. Like, it just seems like a murderer's row in the middle of the field right there.
And don't forget Jonathan Jones, who came in when Winton got hurt last year and didn't miss a step and just made big plays all over the field. And then you've got the Canadians and Jack Cassar and Trevor Hoyt. I mean, when you look at the Mike and Will positions, it's stacked. I'm really interested and intrigued to see how Corey Mace is going to utilize these guys, how often they're going to play four linebackers, because they're going to do that easily. But who will they take out? I mean, the front four is so dynamic. So I'm really interested to see how they employ this ridiculous amount of talent on this team. You hit it on the nail on the head when you talked about, kind of a murderer's row. I don't know what you do because the talent is so deep. Somebody's not going to get the reps that they want, but it's not like they're losing out to a guy who can't play. This group of athletes is just tremendous.
Every Grey Cup team. Sorry, David, I waited, but go ahead. Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
You go first.
Nope, I insist. You go first.
Well, I mean, and you look at, what Winnipeg has done the last few years, and it's all led by Adam Bighill there. I think more teams are realizing just how important having not just good linebackers and elite linebackers, but having the depth in that position and having Canadians in that position too. I think the Argos have, spoil of riches to have you named all those linebackers and 3 of them are Canadian right there. Right. And like just how important 4 actually, sorry, that's right. 4 with, I always think of Williams as the American for some reason. But having 4 there is just it, and it allows you to do different things on the defense when you have all those guys that can be on the field and start at the same time.
Well, middle linebacker is going to be safely a Canadian position, because if Enoch goes down or has to miss a play or 3, Williams can just step right in, and so can Kassar. So you've got the middle, absolutely 100% Canadian. And, if God forbid they needed a 4th guy for whatever the reason could be, Trevor Hoyt can play middle. He's done that before. McManus is just, as you mentioned, I thought he was the best defensive player in the league too. Am I biased? Probably. But Wynton McManus was such a pleasant surprise. I knew he was good. I didn't know he was that good. And last year he just dominated basically every game that he was in. And Jonathan Jones, when he came up here, he had a hell of a end to his career at Toledo after starting at Notre Dame. He just made plays. Like my nickname for him, I call him Playmaker all the time because every time he'd get in, he'd do something. So he's a pretty sturdy guy who just knows Mesa's system so well. You'd watch him at the end of training camp, and it seemed, to the naked eye, he was always anticipating where the ball was going and was always in position. So it's a remarkable 6-pack. And if you count the Sam as a linebacker, I know it's a DB, but if you count Pickett, who was Montreal's outstanding defensive player a year ago as part of that linebacking core, holy smokes.
Mike, we said a half hour. Do you mind staying a little bit longer?
I'm here.
Okay, good. Because I wanted on the tough side, Argos, 3rd and short, very inconsistent. What do you think they've changed this year? Is there a change that they've made to be a little more successful? And some of that, it's the coaching staff has to help in that regard too. It's not always just about the players; it's about schemes and putting the right individuals in the right place. Where do you see this year? Do you see them improving that area, which was a dark area for them last year?
I'm curious because it got a lot better after Kelly took over the short yardage, right?
Right.
He I don't know if he was ever stopped on a 3rd and short. So I'm curious to see what they do now when the regular season begins in terms of who's the short yardage quarterback. Is it going to be Chad Kelly keeping that role, or do they have Dukes or Scott come in and assume that title? I'm curious to see that. I just think it was just execution. They've got the hogs up front. They've got the quarterback. If you want to hand off the ball, you've got Ouellette, who can just run over the first contact that he makes. So they've got options. There were some problems early in the season. Over the last few years, there have been a lot of problems historically with the team trying to run short yardage, maybe since James Franklin left. But Kelly, when he took over, I thought they were fine last year.
Yeah, and I'm looking also with the idea of with Chad Kelly becoming the starting quarterback, a lot of people are wondering, is he ready for the rigorous full season to be that starting quarterback? Because he hasn't done it since he was in college. You've taught I had a chance to talk to him at the end of the game. This is not somebody who lacks confidence, but there's one thing to be confident, but there's also the other idea of the physical ability to handle the rigors of a full season in that position too.
The good thing about Chad, if you went to practices this year during training camp, and if you were the media and you wanted to talk to him, you'd have to wait because he was either taking snaps with Peter Nicastro, working on his footwork, running gassers from sideline to sideline. He's in really good shape. He wants to play. I don't think the season will be a mental drain on him just because he's that guy. He thinks about football 24/7 anyway. I mean, he's really committed himself. He talked about his diet changing because he wants to be the guy. His sleep pattern has changed because he wants to be the guy. He's doing everything in his power to succeed as the starting quarterback for the Toronto Argonauts, and he's driven. Like, he's really driven. So you may call it confidence. There's certainly that. Some may call it, his nickname was Swag back in college. There is a little swagger there, but I think a lot of that swagger is gone now, and it's just been replaced by a guy who's really confident and really dedicated to his craft and absolutely driven to win another championship.
It's important, I think, as well, a part of a player or a human being developing character, it has to do with success and opportunity. And if one I feel personally in talking to him, that he feels he missed some opportunities, and he's almost like I got to make it up now. Now that I'm disappointed in how I handled previously, and he's doubled up on making sure that he does the right stuff now. He's overcome some of the questions that people have had with his work ethic, which you can attest to. I think that builds a lot of character, and that'll stand him in good stead. And do you believe that it's important that sometimes pratfalls can help you be a stronger person, not just a football player?
Oh, absolutely. We had a discussion, and it was a fairly lengthy one, and I wrote about that a week or two ago on Argonauts.ca as well. We just sat in the linebackers room for a while, and just I put the recorder, the phone on the middle of a table, and we just talked. And one of the things that I said, was that different people mature at different rates, right? Somebody will mature at 12 years old. My uncle said of my dad that he was an old man when he was 12. Uh, and I said to Chad, I said, if I look back at my 27-year-old self, I'd say, look at that a-hole, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I matured late. Some may say I haven't matured yet, but I was a kid who was just a kid for a lot longer than some of my peers. Maybe that's where Kelly was. And I asked him, like, when you look back, like, how much have you changed from 21-year-old Chad? And he was like, oh man, like, he understands who he was. He understands the steps that he's taken, not only to mature as a football player, but as a man. I mean, every one of us matures at different rates. I find it really difficult for a 21-year-old kid or a 20-year-old kid or a 22-year-old kid in the spotlight of professional sports. That's got to suck the youth out of you. And a lot of guys just aren't ready to have that happen. And as I've gotten older, I've become more sympathetic to the night. Look at hockey players. They're 19 years old. Here's $1 million. Go and play.
Yep.
Who at 18 isn't going to be affected by that? And being under that spotlight where, the D1 schools are looking at you, and people now with social media are looking for you to stub your toe, because what's the old line that they want to see the great story rise, and then they can't wait to knock you down, and then it rise again.
Yep.
So, or maybe hopefully people are now saying, okay, Kelly's a kid who had every opportunity, screwed it up a couple of times, and now here's this great reclamation project. Maybe he does be that guy that matured late and saw the mistakes of his youth, and now gets to the winner's circle as a starting quarterback. And let's face it, his dream is still to play in the NFL. I mean, that's when you grow up in the United States as a football player, you don't dream of playing for the Argonauts or the Saskatchewan Roughriders. You dream of playing for an NFL team. And when your uncle is a Hall of Fame player who is playing for the team in the city where you're raised, I'm sure his dream was to be like Uncle Jim. And if he can accomplish that, God love him for it. And if we can benefit in the interim by him going out and leading us to a Grey Cup final and hopefully a championship, well, better for us and better for him.
And okay, so looking at the division, there's years where everyone's like, someone's got to want it. The Argos last few years have won it. They won the last few years. Do you feel like there's a team right now, whether it be Ottawa, Montreal, Hamilton, which one do you feel like is going to take the biggest step forward in trying to, make that bid for the top spot?
As much as I hate to say it, I think Hamilton's a pretty good football team. I think a lot, there are questions here from, people outside the Argos organization. There are a lot of questions about Chad Kelly, and there are some questions about how, Bo is going to bounce back in Hamilton. There are questions about how Masoli is going to bounce back in Ottawa. There are questions on how Cody's going to play in Montreal this year. So, you can make those questions very easily. I think each one of those quarterbacks is capable of silencing the critics pretty quickly. But when you look at Hamilton's roster, I think they've done a really nice job over there. I think it's good for football in Southern Ontario that both teams are good at the same time. And we've had that the last couple of years. And, I hope that Hamilton's good. I hope we're better. Ottawa is due. Boy, the fans there who have stuck with them really deserve a home win or two this season. After some of the problems they had last year, and if Masoli is healthy, they should be okay. They certainly will be better than a year ago. Montreal lost a lot of players, a lot of talented players, and we'll see how they bounce back. But Cody's got something to prove to his critics. Jason Moss, likewise, is a head coach there. We've got a new ownership group in place. So I kind of Montreal would be the question mark for me, because I don't know how good they could be this year with such a new look. But if any one of the other three Ontario teams stepped up and won the East, it wouldn't shock me. I'm just hopeful that we're able to repeat.
I don't think any of the four teams don't have a good starting quarterback. All four quarterbacks are good quarterbacks. I don't know the last time that the Canadian Football League Eastern Division could say that. And I guess last year that was said because Masoli got hurt. So if he stays healthy, there's going to be a lot of entertainment at BMO Field. And this is a very special year, 150 years of this organization. When I think of it, 150, really?
It's nuts. It really is. I mean, this is the oldest football team in North America. It's astonishing. The Toronto Argonauts rowing club was founded in 1872, and then a year later, the athletes were looking for something to do between rowing season and hockey season, and said, "Let's try this rugby football thing." And it's worked out okay. 150 years and 18 Grey Cup championships and other championships later, predating the Grey Cup. I mean, this is a very special organization to be a part of, and we're really going to celebrate that this year. And if we could celebrate it with another championship, that would just be icing on what is already a very sweet cake.
Off the top of your head, because you aren't ready for this question, what are some of the things in your mind that you're looking forward to this year's that might be going on that fans will be able to enjoy going to BMO Field?
I won't give away some things because we want it to be a surprise, but
you can do it here. It's okay with us, David. It's okay if he lets out some secrets. What do you think?
I don't want to get in trouble.
No, you don't want to get in trouble. Oh well.
No, I have to work with this guy.
I'll sit on the right side as well. But what can you tell us?
There will be surprises every game. Let me say that. On opening night, obviously, we're going to unfurl the banner. We're going to present that, and we've got a little bit of a wrinkle this year around the banner ceremony as well. I'll leave that as a good hook for now. We're also going to be giving away replica Grey Cup championship rings to the first 10,000 people in the building on June 18 against Hamilton. So that'll be kind of neat. Here's the banner in front of our hated opposition. So that'll be fun. On the 3rd of July, the BC Lions are in town for a little Monday night football. And it'll be the night that we honor Damon Allen and Mookie Mitchell. They are the two latest people to be inducted into the all-time Argos list. You guys were there for the 150 conference. We're really excited about that. What else do we have? There was a really neat thing. I'm actually really proud of the work we did on this, because I don't even want to think of how many hours went into it. There was a group of 5 of us that came up with the daunting task of coming up with the 150 top moments in Argo history. It was Don Landry from CFL.ca, longtime Argo fan and former in-stadium announcer and radio personality here. It was Danny Webb, who is the longest-serving Argo employee back to 1985 as the equipment manager. Paul Woods, who's written a couple of spectacular books on the Argos. I think I have them back here, Year of the Rocket. And
I have one here too.
Back. And let's see. Oh, yeah, that James Fraser guy, Bygone Boatman on Twitter. For those who don't know, James is a history professor at the University of Guelph. His passion is pre-CFL Toronto Argonauts. So,
wow.
And he was coming up with stuff. I thought I knew a little bit about Argo history. I waved the white flag to him. He was incredible. This list would have been so different without his input. I think we have every decade represented except for the 1890s in terms of one of those moments happening. It's a ridiculous amount of work we put into it. The process worked, and at the end of it, when we finally put the 150 together, we looked at the list, and we did it at we took over a room at a restaurant in the West End, and we all looked at it and went, you know what? I'm pretty happy with that list. And everybody said the same thing, which, when you do something that enormous, I was very surprised with the outcome and how well it went, because there were a million different ways that we can go. And our biggest fear is somebody's going to go, how could you forget that play? And it was fairly obvious, but I think we did a pretty good job, and we've got enough veterans on the committee to have gotten through it. So that's something that we're really looking forward to. And we're expecting that we're going to do the biggest game of the year is going to be the October 6th game. So mark that on your calendars. Get your tickets now at argonauts.ca. The official 150th anniversary is October 4th. Our closest home game is Friday the 6th against Edmonton. We're going to celebrate that night. And I'm not going to let you in on the secret, but it's going to be fun.
Well, I guess to summarize, it's going to begin on the 18th of June against Hamilton with a celebration of a Grey Cup. And it's going to continue throughout the year, the celebration of what the Argos mean to this community, what kind of history that they've laid behind, and a recognition because of the five of you getting together, pulling out some of the great plays. The question for me is, will it be seen on argonaut.ca? Is that where we'll be able to see these 150 most significant plays in Argos history?
We're going to do not only videos. We're not going to do every one. We're going to do it in chunks, but we are going to recognize every one, and we will have an accompanying. I'll do a written piece on each one as to why that moment is recognized. There are some you're going to know. Somebody give me a play. Give me a big play in Argo history.
Well, we can go. Are we talking positive and negative?
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking, like the one that comes to mind for me is 2017 Ricky Ray, just before the end of the half, to get the big touchdown throw, right?
The 65, I think it was 65 yards.
100 yards.
100
yards to DeVere Posey. Yeah. So yeah, that's somewhere on the list. Won't tell you where, but I mean, they're going to be ones that you're going to recognize like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to say, I've never heard of this person before. Why are they this? And you'll get a history lesson. It could be somebody from, 60s onward, or in the war era, or, in the early days of the Toronto Argonauts before the turn of the century. If you read the list, I guarantee you will hear a name you have never heard before, because I was in that boat, and Paul Woods was in that boat, and Danny Webb was in that boat, and Don Landry was in that boat when James Fraser would bring something to the table. So then it was up to us to determine where that moment fit in, along with some of the current stuff, which was not an easy task. But I think we did a pretty good job doing it. But it'll be an entertaining list because it'll bring back some memories. Not everything is positive. There are a couple of goofy things on there as well. But just big moments in Argonaut history. Could be a play, could be a trade, could be a signing, could be anything. But it was all represented, and it was a remarkable process to be a part of.
Thank you for taking part in this whole program. I have one last question that every Canadian Football League fan asks. Mike, is it June yet?
Oh, yeah, baby. It's June. We're ready to go.
I think it is June. Mike Hogan, thank you for doing this. Of course, the voice of the Argos on radio. longtime radio personality and a great supporter of the Canadian Football League and specifically the Toronto Argonauts. We really thank you for taking the extra time of being here. We agreed to 30 minutes. You were kind enough to be on for another 20. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
David?
Oh, thank you, Mike. I mean, you put up with us more than I think anyone would want to, but we always appreciate the lessons that come with it too.
Absolutely. And the dedication to the game. Okay. For both David and Mike, I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL Talk Aaron Live Mondays at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Radio Network and, of course, Candid Frank Stanisci on YouTube. Please subscribe. For CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming we offer, please check out SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. That was